Following on from the idea of line of action is this notion of simple versus complex. You can see here that we have a character that is climbing a wall. We have one simple side, this side here, and then we have one complex side, the right side. The business side is the right side. It's where all of this detail is. The way that he's looking, the arm, the hands, the legs. This pose is great because even this hand here, even though it's in front of the body, it's posed in a way so that we can still see the knuckles and the fingers in silhouette. But you'll notice how simple this side here is. The artist has made a conscious decision to tuck the elbow in and to really simplify this line so that the elbow doesn't break that line here. It just flows right on through. So that means pushing the elbow in a little bit so that it simplifies that line. Here's a photo which shows a similar idea. We've got a complex side where the head, the arms, the back, there's a lot of information on this side, on the left hand side, but we've simplified this side here. Okay, if we were to take this hand and we were to have the hand in this sort of area over here where the arm was out straight, it would break that simple line or that simple side. And more often than not, you don't want to do that unless it's important, unless the character is holding something or doing something on that side that needs to clearly be illustrated. Then of course, you can do that. But what we're doing is we're really just simplifying and we're just helping the audience's eye travel through the pose. Okay. And this is another instance where we're using simple versus complex. She's looking in this direction here, but you can see on this side, it's still relatively simple, but we've broken the simple line with this detail of the elbow as well as the fingers there. So if this was in silhouette, you would be able to clearly read this. But there's no need to show the other arm or the other hand on this side here. You can see that the artist has also done a similar sort of thing to what we had here, which is tucked in the elbow. And if you have a look at the hair, the way that the hair kind of flows through the chest and it keeps on going down through the chest, and then we have the arm here. There's no real need to see the hand because it's not really doing anything important. But the way that that kind of flows on through and simplifies the line, it makes for an interesting pose, or it makes the pose more beautiful and more elegant. Once again, with this one, we've got one complex side and we've got one simple side. And you can see, once again, the hand is hidden, the arm is hidden. Now, even though this is a photo, a lot of photographers, they spend a great amount of time posing their model. So you'll often hear photographers look more this way, drop your left shoulder, tilt your head back maybe just a little bit, rotate your chest just around a fraction, and the photographer is sculpting the model so that we get this interesting pose. This is an incredibly awkward pose, but you can see that by tucking the arm behind so that it's not visible, we have this nice simple side, and then all of the detail is on the left hand side, as well as everything which is important. The holster, this little strap, it all has its own negative space and it's clearly readable. There's no ambiguity as to what's going on or what's happening in this this pose here, and that's the key. You want it to be crystal clear as to what the detail is and what's happening. So tilts, by default, whenever we're standing up straight, we'll have our shoulders and our hips will be at a similar, they'll be parallel to one another. Now, to add a bit of interest, if we play with this idea where we have the tilts in opposite direction, meaning if the shoulders are just slightly angled going up to the right on this side, but then having the hips going up to the left on this side over here, so that they're opposing one another, it can add a little bit more appeal. In this case here, you can clearly see what I mean because it's exaggerated. So you don't want the hips and the shoulders tilted in the same direction. So if the shoulders are facing this way, you don't want your hips facing or tilted in the same direction. And what this does is it helps add that line of action, this nice S shape in this pose here. Okay, I've seen a lot of people that do this exercise here, and they forget about tilting the hips, or the direction that the hips are facing, or the direction that the chest is facing. And what they'll do, which is a mistake, is they'll have the chest, the hips, and the head all facing in the same direction. Now you can kind of see that the head is facing off to the left here, just very slightly, but the chest and the hip area is slightly facing off to the right. So there's a little bit of a twist going on in the body. This helps add interest to the pose. Okay, so what you don't want is you don't want your character's face, the hips, and the chest all to be facing in the same direction. So here is another exaggerated pose, but once again, this clearly shows you, this idea of tilts with the chest, the shoulders, and the hips. Now I got these poses from a costume hire. You can actually have a look at these images. There's lots of other costumes there, but the poses are quite cool. Here you can see we've got this cool line of action here. The chest is facing off to the right. We've got a fantastic tilt on the hips, and the shoulders are opposing, and the head and the chest are just slightly off a little bit, as far as, the head is tilted down, the chest is tilted up. They're not all facing the same direction. And another cool thing about this is that, if you have a look at this nice flow through the arms, through the hands, and up through the hands and in the forearm on the other side here, you get this nice sort of connection. There's this rhythm that happens in this pose here. The fingers are posed in a really interesting way, and if this was silhouette, if this was just black on white, you'd be able to get a clear read as to what the attitude of this character is. Here we have an S shape in the pose. You've got your simple side, you've got your complex side, all this detail happening down here, but you get this nice sense of this S, and that's just by the way that the toe is being lifted up off the ground, dragging the knee into the other knee there. The tilts are working, the way in which the head is facing out this way, the chest is facing out this way a little bit, and we're really trying to mix it up as much as we possibly can. So whenever you're finding reference, it's important that you find the right reference. So this one here, you can see it's over cranked. It's very similar to this pose here, but it's just been a little bit overdone. This one here is a bit more appealing than what we have here. It's probably just a little bit forced, too bent in the chest, and she's also tilted forward a little bit, whereas this character here, she has her back arched, and that gives a nicer, appealing sort of look. Now, quite often with your posing, it's going to take around about 45 minutes to an hour for you to do one pose. And it can just be little things which make a difference to your pose. So, for example, this was a critique that someone sent in. This was the pose that they originally did, and they wanted people to comment on it. Now, first off, one of the things which is interesting is that we have the legs, these bottom legs here. They're both facing, or they're both parallel to one another. Okay, and quite often you want to break that up. You don't want there to be twinning, what we call twinning, and that's what I was talking about before, where we have both the legs and both of the arms are doing exactly the same thing. In this case, it's okay, but what we need to do is we need to give some form of variation. Another thing that we should watch out for are the shoulders. And in silhouette, you can clearly see where this one is just broken. It feels like the shoulder is down too low. And what you'd probably want to see is that the shoulder is up just a little bit higher, so that that energy line kind of flows on through. And maybe you would want to raise one of the arms up a little bit higher, so that it's different from the other one. You can see here that we have a pretty straight back, and as well as the neck is straight up and down. So we have a bit of a stick going through the body and through the neck area, whereas what we would probably want is a bit more of a line of action. So this is a draw over, which just helps illustrate that. So you can see here that we've got this line of action. We've pushed the legs a little bit further apart, sorry, so that they're angled away from one another, so that they're not parallel. So you got your line of action, and then we're also looking at, the shoulders and making sure that the fingers are clearly readable. Like if you have a look at this one here, it's just about right, but the fingers are such an important part to what this character is feeling. So spending a bit of time and really getting that level of detail in there is important. And even in this pose here, you can see that we're looking at the tilts, the way that the body, the way that the hips and the shoulders are tilted in opposing angles. Another one of Glen Keane's pieces here, which I really love. I love the simple shape of Tarzan's body, the way that all of this just kind of flows into itself, the body, the leg, this shape is just really cool. And then the thing that he does really well is toes and feet. He just does such an amazing job with toes and feet. If you ever want to study, someone who does fantastic hand gestures and foot gestures, it's Glen Keane when he was working on Tarzan here. But you notice the way that the hand is in negative space, the back is twisted, the direction in which the body is facing is different to the way that the head is facing, and in some ways different to the way that the hips are facing. So the hips are facing forward, the back is twisted, facing away from us, and the head is facing towards us. Really cool. And then there's this nice line of action which kind of flows through the head here and then comes down into this arm and through this arm and then back into the head. And then also, you get this fantastic line which you can just see in these pencil strokes, the energy and the shape in this form. Now this was a piece that someone submitted last year. We can see here that there's quite a bit that's missing. One of the things is that the character's moving, which is fine, but the toes are flat. There's no toe animation or movement on it, and it's a very weak pose. Straight up and down through the body, not very appealing at all. Even with the head twisted a little bit, we're starting to see the head is in a different direction to the chest, to the hips, but it still doesn't work. There needs to be a lot of love given to this pose here for this to work out. You can see here the way that this line kind of breaks, the back line. What would be cooler is if this kind of came up higher. You could keep it still behind, but this line should come up through the shoulder here and out the back, rather than just kind of like intersecting in the back area there. Not very strong again because we've got no line of action. It's cool though that we can see the fingers, the hands, but this hand here is twisted a little bit too far around to us. It would be better if it was facing in the opposite direction away from us. This pose here is a little bit stronger. We're starting to see a nice line of action. The toes might be a bit broken, but it's cool that we get a read on the fingers. It would have been nice to see the thumb, because that would help with this idea of maybe it's pain or something in the fingers, and you would get a sense of that. But in this one, they just kind of feel floppy, and there's nothing really happening to the hands. It just feels like he's unconscious almost. And another thing which is a problem is that the elbow is probably too low. It would have been more interesting to have the elbow up higher here, so that you get that rhythm going through the back, through the arm, the elbow, and then through the arm, and then mix up the arms a little bit so that one is doing something different to what the other one's doing. The same with the legs. You can see here that they're both doing a similar sort of thing. So you want to avoid this idea of twinning and break it up as much as possible. Maybe this knee here could be higher and this one here could be lower. And you can see here that he hasn't paid any attention to the shoulders, and it feels like the shoulder here has kind of collapsed a little bit. It would be better if the shoulder was lifted up a bit more and maybe the elbows were tilted. So as far as this exercise, this one here, it doesn't work as well as what it could have done. This one's nice. It definitely helps tell a narrative. You get a sense of what's going on in his face. There's a nice shape to his back, which is great. You know, this all seems to flow through all of these joints. All the joints aren't intersecting and twisted in odd directions. So that's something that you want to watch out for. And there's a clear read on these hands here. The box, it does break the silhouette, but because of the contrast, you know, we can still see what's happening there. So this is actually quite a good one. This is getting stronger. This is better. You can see here that we've got this nice line of action, and also making, you know, seeing that hand back here, because this is the simple side. This is fantastic. We can break this line. We can see the other hand because this is the busy side, the more complex side. This one doesn't work as well. It's still interesting, but it just feels a little broken. We're still straight up and down with the back here, and also the position of the shoulders just feels weird. It would have been interesting, I think, to have this hand out a little bit further so that, you know, the detail of the fingers was in its own negative space. This hand over here, this side works a little bit better. The knee feels a bit broken in relation to the direction of the foot. You know, it would have been nicer if this knee here was probably in this area here. This was another interesting pose. It was very hard to understand what's going on here. This is using one of the cat rigs that are in Max, but you can see that it's just a bit of a mess. There's just lines all over the place, and like I said, you know, some people just pose this and submit it. It fails on so many levels because it's first of all, it's hard to understand what's going on, and you can see that there's really been no time taken in understanding the pose or posing it correctly. And even from the other side, they submitted another one, and it's like it's still a mess. What they're going for is something which is like this. So, you know, or like the Iron Man pose with the arm down on the ground. Now, if you were to find reference like this, you can see that we've got this fantastic line of action which flows all the way through these two arms, as well as the way that it comes all the way through this leg. The foot feels correct. It's not broken. This is fantastic. The detail in the toes and the way that the foot is positioned, the balance, the attitude in the pose, it just really helps explain who this character is and what her personality is. Whereas if we go back to this one here, you really get nothing from the pose. There's no story to it. You don't get a sense of who the character is or what they're doing. And again, this one here is pretty weak because the line of action is broken, and we've got two busy sides. We've got, you know, this is a bit busy on this side here. It might have been better if, you know, maybe one of the legs was lifted higher and maybe another one trailed down below so that it helped with this line of action. But you really don't get a sense of energy in this pose here. It almost feels like the character's just kneeling on the ground. This one here as well, it's not working. The hands aren't flat on the ground. They're kind of, you know, on the tips of the fingers. And you kind of get a sense that it's, you know, downward dog doing yoga, but it still hasn't been posed correctly. Now, if this object wasn't here, we wouldn't really know that it's hurdles, and obviously the person that did this didn't use reference. Or didn't use good reference. Let me just say that, because you could use reference, but unless you pick the right type of reference, you're going to get a poorly designed pose. So this image here is fantastic, and believe me, this took me a while to get a pose to get this image here. I was looking, you know, for about half an hour online trying to find this pose, because a lot of the images that I was getting, a lot of the photo reference that I was finding looked like this. And you can see here that there's no energy in this pose here, or in this pose here of this kid running. He's doing exactly the same thing like that, but you don't get a sense of this energy. So whenever you are trying to find your poses, definitely, make sure you find the right one. Here you get a really nice sense of an action line coming through the back, and also through these knees here. There's a nice sense of flow there. You get a clear read of the hand. This one here, it works well because his hand is so light and it's in contrast with this the dark color of his shirt, so you can clearly see what's happening there. If this wasn't the case, maybe in silhouette you might want to just break this line over here. But the cool thing about this also is that it gives you one simple side, and then it gives you your complex side on the left hand side there. And it's not that this one here is badly drawn. Technically, it's quite a good drawing. It's just unfortunate that the pose isn't right. Okay, this is another good one. Beautiful sense of energy, and there's a lot of power in that one shot there, as opposed to something like that. You get this broken elbow back here. The hands aren't really doing anything energetic, whereas here you really get a sense of power, or the way that the thumb is against the index finger. It's just a lot more interesting than something which is more relaxed. Okay, and so this would probably be a better piece of reference, than this one here. And you can imagine if you were to spend a week sculpting this out of clay, if you didn't have the right reference to start with, and you were to say pick something that looked like that, I think that you'd be pretty disappointed after a week. But this is just beautiful. The pose is fantastic. Here are some more interesting poses that were done for this exercise, and this is the level of detail that I'd like to see. Spend some time on the lighting, and also on the finished piece. When you submit something for this exercise, it should be a work of art. And you can see here that the lighting is fantastic. We get a lot of detail in the hands, the way that the arms and the shoulders flow through one another, the attention to detail in the head, this line of action which flows through the body. It all looks beautiful. Another dancing one, once again, the line of action, the silhouette, and the way that the fingers are touching the toes. It looks great, and just the way that the way this foot is positioned behind the knee here. So she's thought about how you can simplify this image and not make it too busy. I mean, it would be nice to maybe have seen just a little bit more of the foot, but it doesn't matter, because it still works. Here's another one. Just be careful of the feet. They look like, in this one here, they look a little bit broken. This one feels like it's rotated a little bit camera left, just a fraction. This one here feels like it's rotated too far back. So pay attention to the way that you've rotated your feet. This is a cool one. The shoulders are up. Get this nice line of action again. That's great. As far as telling a story, what the narrative is, the pantomime in this piece works really well. And here's another good one. You can see, just get a nice feel for the back, and this is actually quite difficult to do. When you get in there and you start posing this, you'll see that you just want these to all kind of feather into one another as far as the amount of rotation. You don't want to just like select this one here and rotate it and just break the back. You want to have all of these pieces just gradually rotated so that you get this nice curve. And really push your poses. Here you can see that this was the first attempt, and this was the second attempt. So it went from this, which has a little bit of energy in it. This character here is back a bit. It's kind of working, but the shoulders are probably just too far back on this one. And here we don't really get a sense of any of the energy. The arms are broken, so there's no real line of action coming through the arms. Whereas having the arms nice and straight, you really get a sense of energy in the pose, and also, exaggerate it. Push your pose as much as you possibly can. That's what it's about. Push it to the point of it being ridiculous, and then if it feels too ridiculous, dial it back just a little bit. But make sure that there is a sense of energy wherever possible. This is a great one. The hands, the fingers are working quite well, and it's based on something like this. You can see here that you'd still have an action line, but it is more straight up and down, and so with this one, you still get a sense of it. I would probably I think that one of the issues with this is the way in which the hips are facing. They're facing up rather than towards us, whereas you can see with this, the hips and the chest are all facing in a similar direction. So this one here still works, but it just feels like it's overcranked just a little bit. Now you're more than welcome to use props. You can build them, or you can find them online if you like. That's completely fine. But this is a great one. In Silhouette, you can definitely get a read for what's happening in the pose there. And once again, just the things that I love, the way that the feet are positioned, how they're angled away from one another, how simple these legs are, and just that energy line, that line of action there. Same with this, coming through the arms, through the shoulders, through the hands. So how could we make this pose better? Well, once again, it's straight up and down. We've got all of these, the head, the chest, the hips, they're all facing in exactly the same direction. There's no tilts. There's the shoulders and the hips, they're both parallel with one another. This arm, do we need to see this arm? And what's he doing? Is he scratching his head? We're not really sure. And also, he just feels very flat. Like his elbow here is too far back, and maybe it would be better if his elbow was in front of his body just a little bit more. And so that's what we've got here. You can see that these are some of the changes that were given. Foreshortening the elbow, adding a little bit more of an action line. I'd probably get rid of the hand, because the hand does nothing to this pose, and in fact, it doesn't reinforce what's happening up here either. Is it clenched, or is it it's not an interesting pose, so I'd probably just push it behind the leg there.